Before proceeding with this podcast episode, we want to provide a trigger warning. The following content may be sensitive and could potentially trigger adverse reactions in individuals who have experienced or are currently experiencing similar situations. We advise discretion and encourage self-care. This episode discusses topics such as suicide, depression, and grief. We delve into personal experiences and challenges related to these issues, aiming to provide insight and support to our listeners. However, if you feel that these topics may be distressing or triggering for you, we recommend refraining from listening to this episode. If you find yourself in need of additional support after listening to this episode, please remember that help is available. You can reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. Trained counselors are available 24/7 to provide confidential support and guidance. Additionally, if you or someone you know is experiencing a mental health crisis or emergency, please call 911 or seek immediate medical intervention. Please note that while we strive to provide informative and supportive content, the Motherhood Village will not be held legally responsible for any effects that may occur as a result of watching or listening to our podcast episodes. We encourage self-awareness and self-care and urge our listeners to prioritize their mental health and well-being. Hello and welcome to the Motherhood Village podcast. I am on with a very special guest. I am on with Heather Palacios, who is the founder of Wonderful, which is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to saving the lives of those who are struggling through mental health crisis. Their mission is to reach those people who are struggling with their life box in hopes that they will seek help and choose life. And you can learn more about visiting the Life Box page, or you could check out Wonderful's page and where there's videos. And actually, Heather, if you want to hold one up to show, that would be great.
Yes.
I love it. I can't wait to talk about it. But before we get to the life box and how important it is, I want to kind of take a step back. I always ask my guests to tell me a favorite book or just one that you highly recommend, one that you think would make a most impact. This is a motherhood podcast. So any resource you can share, that's the first question.
Great question. Thank you for having me.
Yes.
I love what you're doing. I was stalking you. Scrolling around on your platforms and stuff. You're doing a great job.
Thank you.
My favorite book is one that is for children, but has a big impact on me as an adult. And it's by Dr. Seuss, called Oh, the Places You Will Go. I like it for kids because it's written for kids. It's the coloring and the artistry is for children, and the concept is too. But it's translated to me as an adult because even as a child, I've struggled with suicide, and now that I'm 50, this has been an ongoing battle for me for 42 years. I started when I was 8, so this the idea of oh, the places you will go. The future tense of that speaks to the inner Heather, the inner little Heather that says, if you're alive, you could still go places.
Oh, I love that. That's so profound. And I think is a beautiful segue into going back to the beginning. I personally heard your story and probably a portion of it at a local event here in Coral Springs, but I want you to share with my listeners and as high level as you can, your journey, as you mentioned just recently, in just a second ago. And when I first saw you was through multiple suicide attempts to now becoming really a beacon of hope for those struggling. And I feel it's very inspiring. Can you maybe share with us what initially motivated you to found Wonderful and where that came from and how your personal experiences have shaped its mission into where it is today?
Of course, yes. So I started struggling with suicide at 8 years old. That was in 1981. Of course, there wasn't movements, organizations, legislature, coalitions, nothing.
Yeah.
So it was a very lonely experience, not only for an 8-year-old, but for my parents. And to this day, I always give my parents credit because they did the best they could with what they had, which in 1981 was very limited. So, interesting factoid, Nicole, is I actually found my little suicide letter recently from when I was a kid.
Oh my God, I
My
just
mom,
got the chills.
yeah, my mom found it in the basement, and it corroborates with my 8-year-old journal that I still have. I've kept it all these years, and sure enough, I I struggled with not wanting to live anymore at 8 years old. And then that just kind of began a trajectory unbeknownst to me where that would be my biggest battle. I turned 50 in September, and I'm still journaling and doing a few other things which I call, my formula to stay alive, because the struggle is real. between 8 and 50, I either was tempted, executed on a plan, or desired to take my life. So I have struggled with ending my life as a child, as a teen, as a college student, as a young adult career woman, as a wife, as a mom, in a pandemic, and with sudden grief in a couple years ago. So almost every season of a human's life, of a female's life, I have struggled with wanting to take my own, but I'm still here. And so I advocate us still being here because when I look over the timeline of my life, had I succeeded when I was a teen, I wouldn't have gone on to college. And my college actually named me alumni of the year a few years ago and had me come in for a special ceremony. If I had died as a teenager when I attempted, I wouldn't have been here for that. And so it goes. Had I not survived the attempt in college, I wouldn't have met my husband. Had I not survived the attempt as a wife 1 year after we were married, I wouldn't have been able to bring DJ and Andy into the world. They wouldn't be part of the human race, and so on and so forth. So I'm always advocating for us to keep going because we woke up breathing. And I have to keep it simple like that because I'm not an intellect. And I do have a childlike brokenness inside of me. So I always see things a little bit more immaturely than the sophisticated adults do.
No, and I think it's so profound. You said so many things there. When was it that you decided then to create Wonderful as a nonprofit to say, like when did it click that you were like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I want to now give back? And like you said, and make people know like to keep going and that like, like, yeah, when did that support come that you were like, okay, to make it like your life mission, basically? Like when did that
Right.
come? Yeah.
So when I was married to my husband, he's a pastor. For 1 year, I attempted suicide in a parking lot in Broward County. It was pretty gruesome, and they were forced to tranquilize me. I was taken to the hospital where they treated my injuries, and then the state of Florida intervened and decided she needs to be locked up. So I was locked up in a psychiatric ward under the Baker Act. They put me in solitary confinement due to the violence I displayed at the scene of the suicide. And it was after that, surviving that I was like, if I have to live, I'm going to help other people suck it up and stay here because not for lack of trying up to that point, up to being 26 years old, I had tried and just couldn't seem to get myself out of this world. So in the year 2000, I was officially diagnosed. I officially went on medication. And over the years, that medication has been increased, decreased, has had to change with pregnancies, has had to change with life changes. But I've always been on some kind of medication. I go to church regularly. I journal. I have to get outdoor activity. So I've been following this formula. It's an 8-step formula since the year 2000. But as a part of that, it's also included traveling around and sharing my story. Now, how it became an official non for profit was during COVID, Nicole. I was being inundated, overrun by people reaching out to me, not for a medical crisis, but for a mental health crisis. I had a mom during COVID in the middle of the night Facebook message me a noose. She's a mom of 4 kids and was about ready to call it quits. And I had to spend, that night praying for her and doing what I need to do legally to help people out. But it was during COVID where, I couldn't go to people that were reaching out because of the shutdown. So I had to do something because I know what it's like to want to die and I want to help people live. And so my friend Julie came over and she's like, why don't I help you ship to people what you normally would take in a pastoral visit or a clergy visit or a house visit or a detox visit or a psych ward visit. She's like, let's just ship them for your house because the post office isn't shut down. So that became Wonderful Incorporated. And in November of 2020, we started shipping life boxes out of my dining room and 2 office changes. And 3 years later, we've done 15,000 life boxes to all 50 states and 14 countries.
Wow. So share more about the initiative and of that and how it helps in reaching and supporting those. Like what is a life box? And I first have to say thank you so much for your transparency. And I know that's part of what I'm assuming like it is what it is, right? Like you said, like
Mhm.
this is what it is. This is my experience. This is my story. So I'm sure it can resonate with someone. But yeah, share what is the life box. I know you showed one briefly before. Maybe pull it up again and say, you know, if someone really needs this, what would it do for someone? If someone were to receive this, what would be the meaning behind it and why they are so, so important?
Okay, so the life box is a box of what I call and my team calls essentials and extras. The essentials are the things I have needed since I was 8 till present. And those are not compromised, they're essentials. And that includes a journal and a Bible and a pen. Because since I was 8, I've had a journal and a Bible and a pen. Nicole, I have a journal and a Bible and a pen for the last 42 years. And my integrity kind of demands that I practice with other people what I have preached to myself to still be here. So that's, and here's the deal. We've had a lot of institutions that are not faith-based and a lot of people that are not faith-based reach out for life boxes, and we curate them to every single situation, but I do keep the Bible journal pen in there. What they do with it, that's up to them. But just I don't know any other way to stay alive. That's worked for me. So those are the essentials. Then the extras are all the other things that make that recipient know they're irreplaceable, that they matter, and that they would be missed if they were gone. So it starts off with a QR code where they can zap it and go to a video from me, letting them know why they got this. And I share my story with them so they know they're not the only one. And then the very next thing they see is a personal handwritten card. There's nothing that says you matter more than a personal. So we've written 15,000 handwritten cards. This particular life box is curated for someone struggling with substance abuse. So there's a bookmark that goes inside of their book that's 10 ways to manage stress. Then there's a game and there's a fidget spinner. And these are just mental releases. That's very important to me to have mental releases. Now these are the things that people do, if you haven't struggled, you wouldn't understand. But we always put hot tea, tissues, chapstick, lifesavers. Those are kind of the physical extras I've needed for the last 42 years. Then everybody gets a never give up wristband. And this is inspired by my youngest brother who gave up his life 48 months ago. The one thing, that my little brother and I always talked about was the shame he had on his wrists. If you have attempted suicide there, or you have struggled with substance abuse, so you have track scars, your wrist can be a point of shame and make you want to give up. And I wouldn't take that laying down. So I told my brother, from now on, because of you, everybody's getting this to say never give up on their wrist. Then this particular one's for a dude, so we put the car sniffer in there because guys smell. And we have a little personal, resource on handling addiction, a wallet size thing to help you handle your addiction, a 28-page addiction encouragement book to read, the Suicide Lifeline, of course, a journal. Everybody gets a journal and a pen and stickers because I think stickers are fun, even for the dudes, and then a post-it. So that's what would go in one a male life box for a substance abuse.
I think it's so wonderful how intentional it is behind it of putting it together. The minute, so my father has suffered from substance abuse. He's a recovering alcoholic, and when you show the lifesavers and some certain things, and I'm like, yeah, I
Yep.
know, right? When you're giving up something and you need something kind of to
Yes.
put it in return, but I think it's so beautiful how intentional it is. And basically what you're showing is like you matter. Like you're receiving this
Right.
box to say, like, listen, you matter, you need to be here. There's someone who loves you, who's thinking of you. Now, when
Right.
I saw you for the first time, unfortunately, the tragedy in Texas, and I don't now remember the town.
Uvalde, Texas.
Yes. You were
Mhm.
sending life boxes there.
Yeah. So actually, what has happened is, Nicole, people give up for a myriad of reasons.
Mm.
And I've seen them all. As these requests have come in over the last 3 years, I have seen, an atheist who is in depression, to an elderly woman whose cat died and she felt hopeless, to school shootings such as Uvalde, where we partnered with the school board in Uvalde, Texas, right after the shooting at Robb Elementary. And we drove from
I remember.
Coral Springs to Uvalde, Texas. We set up a Lifebox drive-through at the convention center, and we did life boxes in Spanish for children
Wow.
and
Oh,
adults, and ran
wow.
out.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
got that. I remember you were like you were like it had just happened and you were collecting donations for that and you were on this mission and I was like, "Oh, that's so
Yeah.
profound because to your point, now these parents, this community is now dealing with this tragedy and think of the
Mm-hmm.
trauma they now have to face, to siblings and all the things." So
And
you're
suicide, and we've actually gone to several shootings, because we have to think, this is how I think. When there is a mass shooting, there are victims, but there are people associated to those victims that will dance with the devil of giving up and committing and dying by suicide. You've got the parents why couldn't I have stopped them? Why did this happen to me? You have survivor's guilt of the other kids who didn't get shot. You have 911 dispatch, who had to hear the screaming. You have the first responders who ran into the facility or the situation and either were hurt or weren't able to save. All of those can be tempted to give up their life. And so when we learn of any kind of mass shooting, we deploy our life boxes as much as we can.
I love that. And I did my own research on you as well. I was on your website and you have the Psalm 118 that says, I will
Mm-hmm.
live and not die, and I will tell what the Lord has done. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
powerful verse that encapsulates, I think, your resilience and the faith that you have. How has your faith played a role in your journey toward recovery and your efforts to support others battling mental health challenges? Why was it so important to put that specific verse? And how has your faith
Right.
transformed this?
Well, I mean, great question. Thank you. I am a person of faith, but I am not in this to force my faith. So I make it very clear when I speak that these life boxes are for everybody, because anybody can die by suicide. I don't want this just going to the people that have the same faith as me, because I don't want somebody with a different faith to die by suicide either. I don't want somebody with no faith to die by suicide. That being said, I am a person of faith, and the reason that is my life verse, I will live and not die, I will tell what the Lord has done, is it's from the Psalms, and it's really my life summed up in a verse. I'll live and tell my story because I'm not dead.
Yeah,
And that inspires me. That verse was penned 4,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, but it resonates with me. And it's not some cute little axiom that
yes,
inspirational poets put on Twitter. This has been a scribed piece of encouragement that's been around, for thousands of years. So it it's got validity to it.
sure.
I believe in that verse. And Nicole, there's this one speech I do when I speak at certain venues, of especially well, yeah, especially when people find themselves in unusual situations with bad mental health, such as, a pandemic or a psychiatric ward, or you're in detox. Those are tough places, but those are not places where you can give up either. You got to push through. And I know what that's like. And, I remember when I was kind of in that solitary confinement in the psych ward in the year 2000, I, I didn't have anybody. I didn't have anybody on my phone. They put me in a room with a bed. I didn't even have a blanket, lest I use it to harm myself. So what do you do when you're locked up in confinement with a security guard outside your door? All I had was God to talk to. It was either talk to my God or talk to my demons. And my demons are why I ended up there. So, I spent that night just praying and crying and just, I couldn't see God, I couldn't touch God. But if the Bible says that he's real, I'm going to take a chance and I'm going to cry out to him, because I certainly didn't want to cry out to the demons that tried to take me out that day. So, what I encourage people to do is, you don't even give up when you think you have no one, because you have someone. Talk to him.
Oh, I think that's so beautifully stated. You're like, oh, I could have talked to my demons, but I needed to flip. That is so powerful. I want to
Yeah.
pivot. This is a motherhood podcast. I want to take it back. You mentioned 8 years old.
Hmm.
Someone like me who's a mom of a 6-year-old boy, right? I'm like, whew, and he's already showing signs of anxiousness and things like that that we've talked through. Could there anything that you think maybe your parents could have done differently? Obviously, we're talking, 50 years ago, parenting and what we know now is so different. Even the mental health that's available for parents is much better, still a long way to go, but much better than we were. We can talk about it. I run support groups. There's more support groups for moms and dads.
Hmm.
Do you think anything could have changed? And for any mother and father listening to this, are there certain signs to look for? Or is it just connecting with our kid? Is it asking, are they okay? Talk to me about that, of that little 8-year-old that maybe your parents could have, or it just was something that you dealt with. And part two of that is you as a mom, how
Yes.
have you helped with your own kids and recognizing if they've had any mental health struggles?
Right, right. Okay, to your first question, three bullet points to parents
Love it.
of younger kids. Number one, believe them when they say it. I don't want to be crass, but I may never be on your podcast again, so I'm just going to say it like it is. I've done the funerals. I've been to the funerals of children whose family didn't believe them. Children do know how to kill themselves. Google is accessible to everybody. If your child says to you or shows you hopelessness, despair, depression, just believe them. Now is not the time to out argue them, to tell them to buck up, to tell them to not be so weak. No, no, believe them.
Or you'll be
Believe,
okay. It's fine. It's
yeah,
not that
yeah,
big of a deal.
right. No, believe them. All I needed, I was being grossly and almost illegally bullied at 8 years old. So the school was not a source of belief in me. The teachers didn't care, they looked away, and all the students were against me. We didn't have any family around. So it was just my core family. Well, I'm the oldest of three brothers, so I didn't have siblings to look out for me. I had a mom and a dad, and I really needed them to believe me when I said, I cannot go to school today. They are going to hurt me. Secondly, is don't use flowery, soft language with these conversations of killing yourself, because a lot can get lost in translation. We have to be able to say to a child, son, daughter, I love you. I'm with you. Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? Now, with older people, I use killing yourself. But with kids, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Because here's the deal: the depression, the anxiety, the bullying, the childhood trauma, the ADHD, the divorce, the having to go to a new school, all of those, we can get professionals to help. But if they're dead, nobody can help. So the immediate thing to tackle is if they're thinking about hurting themselves, because I've seen the kids who have. And then lastly, is my husband has been interviewed over the years, and he has a lot of things that he would say, but the one thing I love that he talks about is this boundary. It's a soft, loving boundary where my husband says, it's my job to love Heather, it's God's job to save her. And I think my husband has that boundary because there has been times where he was afraid to come into the house and had to ask the boys to wait in the car, and he had to wrestle with, if she is deceased, am I going to live the rest of my life as a bad dad, as a bad friend, a bad pastor, because I didn't save her? Well, then two lives are lost. So we encourage people that sometimes people do end up taking their lives, but we can't give up our lives if they do. What we need to do is we need to live in honor of them. Now that's probably a little for a little bit older children. I don't think that manifests as much in a home of a little child, but those are the three things I would say.
And then the second part of that was, how have you helped with your own little ones? And I guess the same thing, right? If they've talked to you, like, how do you even foster that kind of communication? Because you remember, you're talking to the millennials that maybe didn't have parents to give us the tools to know how to talk to this. I am so fortunate that I've been able to talk to people like you, 180 something episodes, almost 5 years. So I am so thankful that I have some tools in my parenting toolbox that when my son says certain things, I look at my husband, I'm like, no, we need to talk about this, talk about anger, talk about feelings, all the things, right? That we now
Mm-hmm.
know, the consciousness of
Mm-hmm.
it all.
Mm-hmm.
What tools, what has helped you to be able to even foster some of those own conversations with your own children, or even helping parents foster that with their own kids? Because we weren't
Right.
taught that.
Right, right. So great question. I'm not a parenting expert,
No,
but
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 your parents,
so
yes,
but I'm a
yes,
parent, and
yes.
DJ is 21, Andy's 19. They're both in school to become airplane pilots. So I've got some years under my belt, but I'm not an expert. So
Yes,
I want to
yes.
preface that. The two things I would say, Nicole, is number one, don't speak your diagnosis into your kid's existence.
Love
Let me
it.
repeat. Let
Yes.
me repeat that for the people in the back. Don't speak your diagnosis into your children's existence. Just because I have it does not mean my kids will. And I will not speak that over them. And I will not parent them the way I needed to be parented.
Oof.
My
Yes.
mom and dad had to parent me, but DJ and Andy are not me. So I can't parent them the way my parents treated me. They're complete DNA wise, genetically, they're even different genders. So I had to blaze a new trail with my husband for these two brand new creatures that had never existed before, and that included never speaking into their lives or including in my parenting that they might be suicidal. No, no. They might, and guess what? Thank God, this is not the plight of either of our boys. They have not had any kind of hard mental diagnosis. Imagine if I would have parented them through the filter of they're probably going to be suicidal because I was. Oh my gosh. You know, the other thing is, and this is very practical. Okay. This is probably more for the boy moms because I only have sons, but the times that I've been able to have the talks in their pain, the time where we were able to have conversation where they were even able to cry was when we were parallel, not face to face. It's when I was driving them to school. I'm here, they're here. I'm here, they're back here in this back seat. They're in bed and I'm sitting beside their bed. So I don't know the psychology behind all that, but I have noticed over the last 21 years of being a mom that the deepest conversations, the most painful ones, were when we were side by side, not face to face, as far as sons go.
Oh my God. Yeah. Actually, you have me thinking because I label my little guy still to sleep. And I told my husband, and he's 6, as sometimes I'm like, oh, it would be nice to not have to be apart for bedtime. That is when truly we have our most profound conversation. And he is a boy. When we have the face to face, you can see him getting a little uncomfortable,
Yeah,
and I know not to push, but I know
right,
around bedtime, I'll make a mental note like, okay, I can open up and he's facing this way. We're looking
right,
up, we're talking.
right,
And so
right,
there is something I think profound and special. And I have heard that there is something, especially with teens, boy or girl, that having conversations in the car because it allows for it to be more of a neutral space and you're not like,
right,
tell me what's
right,
going on in
right,
their face.
right. Yeah,
So thank you for
exactly.
sharing that. Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Well, I was just gonna say, another practical thing that I would do with the boys when I would pick them up from school. They're sitting in the back, or one's in the front, one's in the back. But we played trash or treasure every single day. And as they got older, they're like, "That's so lame." But elementary school years, that from 3 years old until probably sixth grade, I got a lot of years out of playing trash or treasure. And I'll tell you what, they like to brag, so you give them a chance to brag, but in that, secretly intertwined strategically is mastermind mom saying, we're also going to do trash. And that's where I'm going to know how you're really doing.
And what would you say? Like, what was your treasure for today? What trash did you have today, or what was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
They'd get in
love
the
it.
car. On the way home, I'd say, trash or treasure? Who wants to go first? And then, nope, if they wouldn't raise their hand, I'd pick DJ, you go first. And we always do trash first because I want to end on a positive. I want to pull into the driveway and walk into the house with a positive. But yeah, trash or treasure, everybody had to play it. And if they'd be like, I don't have anything, I'm like, well, we're not getting out of the car until you say something. And so I would drive, but they learned real quick. We're doing trash or treasure, the non-negotiable.
I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. And I love, and I'm sure, because I think it's important too for then you would then share, I'm sure yours, like, yeah, this was my day. This is what I had for
Yep.
trash. This is treasure to
Yep.
open and foster that. I have a couple more questions. What role do you believe, if any, schools, colleges, workplaces could be in addressing mental health challenges? And I'm sure that could probably be a whole nother
Yeah.
podcast conversation. But is there anything that you think that can move forward with, like anything that schools, workplaces, things, even for moms, anything that you think could be out there for companies or people to do other than maybe, I guess, just being aware that if there's someone, or maybe I'll preface it by this way. If there's someone listening to this and thinks that there may be someone who is struggling,
Mm.
what would you recommend they do? There we go.
Okay. All right. Well, as far as administration, faculty, teachers, schools, all that, it's very controversial. It's a hot topic. All I would say to that is I have compassion on all of them. I know they did not sign up to be the parents of these students. However, they may be the only person that that child has. They may be the only set of ears that isn't going to abuse them, ignore them, betray them, walk out on them, not love them, wish they weren't born. I mean, so although they have every right to be like, I didn't sign up for this. I'm just a teacher. You are just a teacher. But my teacher in 5th grade, Mrs. Funk, also became my hero. She saw the abuse that was being done to me. And when nobody else did, she stepped in and stood up. And I know that that wasn't her job, but I'm still here. There's a lot of stock in mentally supporting a student. And then the tools for people, it depends. Of course, there's this range of helping people that might be mentally struggling. I mean, if they're suicidal, there's a protocol for that. If they're in mental duress, there's a protocol for that. You know, listen and believe. Don't discount it. Listen to them, believe them, believe what they say. If they say they're suicidal and it's a teenager and they keep saying they're suicidal and you're so sick of them crying wolf, guess what? There's still something wrong with them if they're crying wolf. So just believe them.
Yeah.
Believe and listen. Secondly, is get help. Again, that is a huge range. I could do a whole podcast on sources of help, but 988 is licensed, encouraging therapists 24/7. If you are a parent or a business owner or anybody's in a position of leadership and you've got somebody underneath you that you're concerned about, then you and that person are going to call 988 together and just talk it out. Or if you can't, if 988, or find a therapist, but just they need to get help beyond themselves. I've never been able to help myself. Never. I've always, since I was 8 years old, I have had a professional in my life to talk to. I cannot, I've not put that on my loved ones because they're not trained. Like I said, it's their job to love me, but it's not their job to fix me or save me. I mean, that's so beyond their roles. And then honestly, I would order a life box. We do life boxes for children, students, postpartum.
I was just going to say postpartum.
Depression, sickness, cancer diagnoses, loneliness, bullying. We do for teachers. Yeah. We do for parents. I mean, we curate it to the affliction of that specific person, and they're free and they're priority shipped.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So my final question to you, well, actually two, but the last one is something. Your story emphasizes the importance of resilience and finding purpose in life struggles. How do you maintain your own well-being still? Like, what is it for you that simultaneously supports others in their darkest moments and uplifts you? Like, how do you, and I'm not going to say balance, but juggle that? And what message do you hope to impart to those who may be listening and struggling with their own mental health battles right now?
Oh, great questions. Oh my gosh, you're such a good podcaster. Wow.
Oh, thank
Your
you.
your questions are fuego. All right. First, how do I balance? I don't have, chemically speaking, neurologically speaking, I don't have a balanced brain. They've looked closely at it. There's some neurons misfiring. Helping people not give up is very taxing on somebody that struggles with wanting to give up. So, I do have to follow my strict formula. And my formula is also well versed with my psychologist, my pastor, and my husband. So they know those are my three. They know to check in on me if I'm making sure I'm doing my formula because, I've had people FaceTime me while they're taking their life. I mean, I've seen a lot, and that
Wow.
can really take a toll on you. So I'm no good if I'm dead.
Yeah.
So I've got to work really hard to stay alive because that's my biggest temptation. So
So
my
go ahead. Go
formula
ahead. No.
is regular counseling, medication, and willingness to tweak it when needed, journaling, church, outdoor activity, knowing my value, and having boundaries.
Mhm.
Those are the things I have to do every day and stick to be in this business when it's also my weakness.
I was going to say, yeah, I mean, I run my peer-to-peer mom groups where we kind of talk and vent, and I come home like on this high, but also like then I come down, right? Because we talk about, we're just talking about the day and anxiety and different things. So I can only imagine. And I guess it's akin to, again, thinking from the substance abuse part, like it's constantly doing the work. It's
Yeah.
constantly
Yeah.
doing the work.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing that. But how can people connect with you? How can people donate? Let's end this on there. Yeah, I know you're in South Florida, but please, how can they reach out to have you speak? All the things.
Right. Well, to circle back around to one other question that you asked that I didn't answer is we partner with a lot of businesses and
Oh,
organizations. Either we bring the supplies to them or they all come and visit us and we curate life boxes. So I just want to put that out there. If mom groups or support groups or any organization wants to do a partnership for us where you get your hands in on you're assembling these things and making them knowing they're going to people that are struggling, we would love to do that. Other than that, you can go to wonderful.com and there is an wonderful.com and you can request a life box for anybody, even yourself. We will curate it to that person's affliction and get it priority shipped. If you want to donate or sponsor, I'll say very candidly, Nicole, that the harvest is overwhelming for people that need life boxes, but the donors are few. So if anybody has a heart for this, please donate or sponsor. But everything can be found at wonderful.com.
thank you so much for coming on, for speaking so candidly, for being so transparent and honest and sharing your story and for all the work that you do. I already wrote down because I didn't even think about it in the postpartum aspect. And there are a couple of mothers I would love to send boxes to and donate on behalf of the Motherhood Village. So thank you. And continued blessings to you for Love and Light.
Thank you.